The Electoral Commission under Article 62 of the 1995 Constitution is charged with the mandate to organize elections every after 5 years. And in the month of August 2024, the Electoral Commission issued a roadmap for the election year 2025-2026. And in this year, 2025, we saw that particular roadmap revised, but later on approved. And in the month of April 15th, the Secretary General of National Resistance Movement, that is Mr. Richard Todwong, went ahead and also issued a roadmap for the National Resistance Movement Party roadmap. And May 6th, we saw the election of LC1s, of course, an election that happens under the party structure of the National Resistance Movement Party. And today we are talking about our political parties ready for the 2026 general elections. Our case, we are going to look at the internal party democracy. We are going to look into the National Resistance Movement Party, the Democratic Party, the National Unity Platform, Forum for Democratic Change, among other political parties, and we understand where are we and how prepared we are for the 2025-2026 general election. And in no particular order, I am joined by a panel of distinguished ladies and gentlemen who will help us put perspective to this conversation. So I'll begin from my immediate right, Mr. George Ginyera, who is a final year student of law at Makerere University. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much.
We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
We're joined by Ms. Apili Cynthia Esther. Very happy to have you here, and I'm looking forward to having a very interesting conversation with you.
Thank you.
Last but not least, the president of Makerere Debating Union, Mr. Arthur. Most welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. All right, George, context, something that I would like to have in this conversation. I said that in the year 2024 in August, the Electoral Commission issued the roadmap for the election year 2025-2026. And the National Resistance Movement Party took center stage by also giving us that roadmap. And of course, that the ruling party, their roadmap said that on May 6th, they will begin the elections of LCs. We know that the election of LCs is very paramount and critical in structures for the party because they're fundamental in mobilization for the party.
Definitely.
That being the case, let us get context to this conversation before we go into the internal intricacies of what is happening in the parties. Bring us up to speed from, first of all, historical perspective, looking at where we get the multi-party dispensation, and then we relate it to current context.
Yes, thank you very much, Onen. I think, like you've mentioned, Uganda is heading into actually we're in the heat of the 2026 general elections.
Yeah.
I think it's boiling up well, so far so good, with minimal violence, I would want to think. And I think, like you've mentioned...
I would beg to disagree, but proceed.
Minimal
violence,
minimal.
because someone could just look at the recently concluded by-election
In Kawempe.
The violence looks
But
to be minimal,
that,
though.
in my defense, that would not be part of the 2026 roadmap, which I was alluding to.
But proceed.
Yes.
It's still tallying up.
It's tallying up to,
2026.
okay.
Yeah.
So like you've mentioned, I think we're in this moment today because of the amendment that were of the Constitution that required that we enter into a multi-party democracy. Possibly for our viewers, back in the day, we had what we call the movement system, where persons were required not to affiliate to any political party, but rather would stand individually and would be voted on their individual merit. Yeah. That was replaced by what we have today. A plethora of political parties, from the National Resistance Movement to our newest is no longer National Unity Platform. Now we have what we call PFF, a breaker from FDC. So I think...
What's PFF for
PFF, I only know their symbol is a phone, actually.
I only found out about it in church yesterday.
In church. So it's there. Actually, the president is the current Lord Mayor, Elias Okwag.
Okay.
But it's a breakaway. I think they're the Katonga function of FDC. So I think to the run-up of where we are right now, I think that's the brief history that I could give. But maybe also to mention is that I don't know whether we're going to get into the discussion of the importance and also the relevance of internal democracy processes, at least within the political parties.
Yes, definitely.
Because the NRM has, I think, one of the most comprehensive internal democracy processes right from the village. And I think it was the NRM had elections in over 7,000, I think 72,000 or 7,200 villages, which I think is something very important. When you go,
it's very good for the party's mobilization.
definitely,
Yeah.
because many people would think the National Unity Platform, I think 2 weeks or so, also appointed. There was a vetting process and there was appointment of the Electoral Management Committee, which is quite different from what the NRM has.
Yeah.
So NRM candidates are voted by popular vote, while in National Unity Platform there's a voting process, there's a committee that looks at the different strength, the financial muscle, and also the power of the different candidates, and thereby hands over the card to the chosen candidate. So I think what we have in the NRM, in close to all the villages, because I also participated in the
Well done.
yes, in the youth league elections in my village, in Lower Parabok,
So
Madio Polo district.
Should we expect you on the ballot?
No. For my sake, I'm doing it for my persons who are running. I have very many colleagues who are running.
I hope this statement won't come back to her.
I know definitely it won't come back.
Right,
definitely, it won't come back. But as a wind up,
Yeah.
so I think it's something very important.
Yeah.
And you go back to our districts. I think when a person gets the NRM card, most certainly they'll win the general election. Not because of the strength of NRM in itself, but because of those numbers that have been part of the process from as early as the village to the parish to the sub-county and thereafter to the village to the district.
Cynthia, there's a statement that he made towards the end of George made towards the end of his submission, and he says they will win the election because of participating in the process. I would like to relate this to, the election roadmap provided for the elections of the special interest groups, and that provides for the youth, women, and persons with disabilities, and the election is geared to happen this year in August. Of course, the roadmap provides that most of the activities will begin next month in June.
Yeah,
but at this point in time, we have the special interest people, the young people, and persons with disabilities gearing up, for example, in the NRM party, in the process of getting involved in the structures. And let's just understand this. Generally, most of the young people who are vying for office and are participating in this process, let's say people interested in running for positions in the National Youth Council or the youth MP position, the youth member of parliament seats, oftentimes want to run in the ruling party, that is the National Resistance Movement. A statement, he says, they will win, because many young people assume, but also facts have proven, for the past, I think, decade, most youth leaders in those positions are from the National Resistance Movement. Now, let us understand, why is it that most of the youth who are running those positions come from the National Resistance Movement party and not from opposition parties? What is NRM doing right in its internal democracies that the other political parties are failing to get right?
Okay, so one thing is you can't separate politics from propaganda, but I think we also can't take away from the internal structures that strengthen the existence of NRM in general, because they are more democratic in nature, but when it comes to lower level politics, it's very interactive, and most importantly, it's very inclusive. So like he said, by virtue of the fact that you're willing to board a bus to head back home, to participate in those elections, but you're also willing to post these people, you understand them. And also because it's youth elections, for instance, when it comes to like the special interest groups, we are invested because most likely you've seen this person and seen how much they've worked hard to get to where they are, and you're willing to see their passion and their dream come to life. So I think, one, just the inclusionary nature of how NRM internal structures largely work, but two, there is a lot of stability within the party in itself. So that's just within like the good aspects. You will notice when it comes to parties like FDC, like UPC, the internal divides.
Allow me just hold you there. Stability. You mentioned stability. Is this stability affiliated with financial muscle? Because oftentimes,
definitely,
what we have seen with the highly monetized politics, often young people want to run for these positions because they do not have the resources, and maybe the party could assist them with that. Something we see not happening in other political parties. So is the strength of NRM affiliated with the financial muscle? that oftentimes the other parties do not have?
I think it's two things. It's a backing of a financial muscle, and it's also the ability to spot potential. Because you can't have a financial muscle and not have people with the potential to body it. You look at the likes of Jacob Beyeru. Those are significant figures that have made significant steps and strides, and they have been able to have that backing financially from the party. So I think it's two-way. It's a financial backing, but it's also the ability to identify potential. Because most likely, you would notice that a lot of the individuals that now choose to use NRM as their umbrella to push through are significantly viable youth that have had a huge implication down from university politics up until they're out of university. I think recently I also saw Charity, a former contestant for the MOVE's Guild presidential race, make a switch from NUP to NRM. Exactly. So you would notice that regardless of the financial backing, they also do have the potential and capacity to propel for. Because you can't have.
Could we then argue, because some people would say they are opportunists. They see that
yes,
there is this young person who looks to be pulling a crowd.
Yes.
And then because they have the resources, but also young people are desperate,
yes,
then they opt for it.
I remember having a similar chat on this same panel. Previously, we had, I think, Denise on the panel as well. And we tried to talk about something called career politics. So politics in Uganda is not about leadership and the act of service in itself. It is more about the opportunities that you're able to get out of being in these spaces, but most importantly, making money from these spaces. I think there's that popular trend, every time there's an election, it comes up of, I think he was an MP, he said something in Uganda and said, Muri dekatinange kandieko. So it's become more of a career thing to make money out of. So yes, I will concede to the fact that I think most people that take up these spaces are opportunists, but I would also, very controversial question, do you blame them?
Let's hold you there. Arthur, the controversial question of do you blame the youth for opting to run for positions according to the national, under the party, the ruling party NRM, I think that's a question I would like to pose to you. But then two, looking at this, the other political parties as well. Back in the day, DP was a party known for grooming very many young people under Uganda Young Democrats, UYD. And it was a hotspot for many youth leaders. And today we're talking about internal party politics. And let's also first let's just have a deep dive in Democratic Party itself. At the moment, people would argue that the president of the Democratic Party is in an alliance with the National Unity, with the National Resistance Movement Party, the NRM. And him opting to still come as flag bearer for the DP is most likely a conflict of interest with his boss, his employer, that is the president of this country. Something that I would possibly maybe disassociate, because I think the agreement provides that he's only there to perform the duties as the minister, but he still serves as the president of the party. But let's understand also now, for example, Democratic Party, known for its mentorship of youth leaders, but at the moment seems to be in a situation of generally divided. So as you answer our question, let's now first look at Democratic Party and the strengths it once had in mentoring leaders, but now with a seemingly glaringly and disappointingly almost not being seen or not even being heard about. Your take.
Thank you so much. First of all, our political parties have a problem of personalities.
Yeah.
When you get to the reality of NRM, of the ODP, the FDC, the party is largely structured around one person. And when that person is out of the picture, we get problems. So that is where problems have started. And then the conversation of DP, for me, I am one of the Ugandans who feel at the moment we do not have DP. We have what used to be DP and people who are members of DP, but the fact a political party, maybe we can first put this out of the way. The conversation of a political party is that there is a difference in ideology. So if I do not agree with the way you are leading a state, and then you appoint me as a minister to serve under your government, to implement your manifesto, then there is a problem. So we need to tell ourselves the truth that at the moment, Norbert Mao, who is a very good leader, by the way, one of the most intelligent people I have seen, is at a point where he cannot deliver the DP mandate. That is, if it still exists. For me, that is what I want to believe. So, and also, we need to see that
but
DP...
Arthur, the DP mandate, or DP as a party, has always fronted for dialogue.
Sure.
And it's a party that we have seen work with the ruling government in history as well. And that, I think, is among the fundamentals of the Democratic Party, of the Democratic Party, that you can work with others even when you're not in government, and solely lies on the ideals of dialogue. So how would DP's alliance with the ruling party, and then in the picture of Norbert Mao, affect his credibility of leading the Democratic Party to greater heights? Because seemingly they are the only party that has worked with the ruling government, and they have, and at least they have made some strides. So does that then affect the President Norbert Mao's credibility to lead Democratic Party forward? Because it's a party that seems to me to still have some hope.
It doesn't exactly take away the credibility for him to lead, but what it takes away is the hope and the trust of the Ugandans. You see, the conversation about political parties is about values.
Is it trust of Ugandans? Is the trust now reliant on the personality of him working with the ruling government that some Ugandans are against? Is that the trust?
DP members are against. So when you are DP, you are working to get the president out of the seat. So if your president is now working to implement the manifesto of that sitting president, that becomes a problem. We have a clash of ideology, so we have lost the trust. So that's why it is very hard right now for DP to plant structures in some areas of the state, because what are they basing on? You are already working with the president, which literally will look like you are believing in what he's doing, or maybe we can work with what he's offering. Because that is the conversation that seems to be at stake.
He has an interjection.
Yeah, maybe because possibly there's some falsehood to what he said. When the President General of the DP was signing the cooperation agreement, it wasn't to implement what the NRM already had existing, but rather even in the cooperation agreement, there were areas of concern that the DP was going to implement. The only challenge I might have with Mao, for example, the transition bill, which has not yet been tabled out now, some electoral reforms, possibly, and we have seen cooperation agreements happen globally, even in Germany, in the UK, where you have a minority joining a majority to get enough seats in parliament. Yeah. So I don't think it's something that is novel to the political space. It's something that happens. And maybe lastly is that the cooperation agreement wasn't to implement what the NRM already had on table. Otherwise, the DP was also to bring into some things that they wanted to be seen tabled in parliament.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
I watched the show immediately after Norbert Mao's appointment. I was on Frontline with Dr. Miria, and he had received a lot of backlash. People were saying, hey, you used to say intelligent and all that. And one of the things that Dr. Matembe talked about is it is so hard to dine with the devil, which is literally what he is doing. Now, if you look at the mode of operation of Ugandan ministers, they don't do much. Because I can authoritatively put up a question and say, what is the special difference between Minister Mao and all the other ministers? Because they agree on the same things. If cabinet has passed a resolution, which are usually unfair resolutions to the state, we expect the opposition to fight for us. But now we have a minister ahead of a full political party, a political party that once used to groom leaders is now part of those people who are oppressing us. When you are looking at this conversation on the lens of the opposition, the government is oppressing us. So as opposition, they need to come up together and find any possible way of getting it out of the way. So as long as you are in the middle of their meetings, you're attending, you have access to their secrets, you have access to their strategy, then it becomes complicated. Then also, this is also in a context of the ruling party uses state resources and everything and infrastructure to build their manifesto, to build their campaigns basically to win elections. So when you are part of that structure, and then we are saying there is a problem with the judicial system, we are saying the backlog of cases is still there, we are seeing low recruitment of magistrates, which were the initial problems when we had ministers who were NRM, and now we have another minister, and we have not seen a big difference. It is very hard for us as Ugandans to pick trust. And maybe before I complete, I want to respond slightly to what he has said. The conversation of would you blame them? Yes, I would. Because we are trying to bring change. These are people who are opportunists, and by all manner of definition, we don't need to associate with them. We are trying to see if we can bring change. The youth are fighting, but because a year or so that when Evelyn Anita knelt down, she's now a minister, then he also went and knelt in parliament and said he was kneeling in prayer. And these people who do these things, their lives change. So whoever is going there, clear cut, is thinking about themselves. And I think as youth and several other people in the special interest group, we need to get to a point where we can work for the state, at least offer the state a little more of what we have than thinking about ourselves. So politicians should reduce a little bit on how much they think about themselves, including the youth and any other person, and we think about the state a little bit more. It's going to be very fair.
Okay. Something that I think, the English oftentimes say, if you can't beat them, join them. And the status quo seems to show that those who have failed to beat them have joined them. And maybe you never know joining them means when you're there, that's when you can try and offer the change that you're fighting for, rather than just making noise from the background and then offering nothing. But
which has not worked, at least from the examples we have seen.
It's up for debate.
So I think genuinely saying that we need to fight against something, it's more like telling Ugandans the obvious, because we know it. We are proximate to the challenges. We experience the pains of everything. But the question is, for all the number of years that you've been saying we need a transition in government, have you gained the capacity to create that transition? Definitely not. That begets the question that how much are you willing to suffer when there is an out for you to benefit out of a system that you have contributed to and has placed you in the gutters. So it might not be fair, and yes, we might call out young people that want to constantly switch and be in these spaces and benefit from them. But the question is, given the same opportunity, what would you do different, and would you have the capacity to do that you want to do different? So one thing that we need to acknowledge is we ideally don't have the power to transition a system. The people who seemingly have the power, the likes of Bobby Wine, the likes of Eddie Mutwe, where do they end up? You have someone publicly talking about how they have you in a basement. So we, I think, also need to put into perspective that no matter how much we want to change certain systems, we don't have the capacity. Even when we try to have the capacity, there are people who have the muscle to be protectionists, to guard that space because they're benefiting from it. They will make you suffer, cry, and pain through that whole situation. So it's one thing that we are going to condemn. It's another to also look at the thorns within which the people we are condemning exist in. Because honestly speaking, you look at the likes of Jacob Beyeru and how much they've, struggled to place themselves there. Do we genuinely think they didn't have good ideas? Do we genuinely think they don't have strategic policies that would better the country, better
Cynthia,
the situation?
The argument against some youth leaders who have vied for positions, young people say they went there, did a lot of nothing, that's in their words, did a lot of nothing, and again they want to run for other offices. You termed it in your submissions as career politicians, that you're in office now, when time is almost running out, you're looking for the next opportunity to push you to the next level. So how can we have these career politicians do what they're supposed to do and just not sit there?
I think one, the existence of career politicians is because of the system they've been pushed to exist in. You don't just come and become a career politician because you genuinely want to make money out of the system. So your argument
is that now the ruling party has failed to groom its own youth leaders to help them implement, and rather they've got swamped up in monetized politics.
I don't think it's an issue of the leaders. I think it's an issue of the structures within which the leaders exist.
That's why I asked. For example, the national resistance movement structures provide for the NRM youth wing, provides
I think
all
it's-
that.
I think it's beyond the political party in itself. But it's
Because
now
it's those
structures like the
structures
justice
that are
system.
supposed to.
Because NRM is grooming you, that's one thing. We are going to show you this is what good leadership looks like. We are going to finance you, we are going to back you up and all these things. It does not, however, take away from the fact that the parliament in itself can't really do much. It does not take away from the fact that the justice system exists by name. So it's the important structures that spin the nature of leadership that lead to implementation of things like policies, upholding the constitution. When those systems are failing, there is no way you're going to expect, no matter how brilliant of a politician you are, you can't expect to have a transition within that system. It's either you accept to say, I'm going to die for the cause I stand for, or you're going to indulge yourself in the system, benefit from it, and walk away. Do what you can and walk away.
Right.
Because ideally, those are things you can't change. Because you can't say that Jacob in his, existence hasn't done much. Obviously, you look at the NYC trying to struggle and fidget for young people that go to represent the country, for example, at COP. Denise would tell you the negotiations that happen indoors for them to have those spaces. So, and I think it's also a conversation about the relevance of the existence of some of these structures, because young people, we would argue they just exist by name, they just exist for the virtue of representation, like having a model existing, and they're like, okay. But I think that for the most minimal change and for the most minimal benefits that we are able to get, because I feel like sometimes we overly criticize, which is necessary, but we forget to celebrate the different things that we actually are able to benefit from these structures that exist. So mine is to say, I do agree and I consent and I'm with everyone when we criticize and say these things are bad, the structures are rotten. However, we can't pin people for trying to exist within these structures, create the most minimal change, and then leave on. Someone would call me an apologist, but I think it's also gotten to a point where I would ask you as a critic, as a critique, if you were given the same space, what would you do different? Would you have the muscle? Because a lot of people can't die for their cause. They definitely can't. It's just about we are strong enough, and they would have backroom discussions. Bring them to the table to actually have discussions and call out people. You look at the March to Parliament. We were able to tweet about these things. How many young people walked up to the street to say, no, Anita Among is corrupt? So my biggest issue is we are hypocrites, and we love to dance ballet behind the curtains instead of in front of the stage. And I think that's where my biggest issue is.
Okay. As I get back to you, something you need to be pondering about, and I'll get back to you on that, is the critical mass that we as young people possess ahead of 2026. We are approximately 78% of the population is young people, and majority of that are almost of voting age. And the recent update of the register, I don't know how many people were in position to go and actually update. Many young people have lost hope and said, just sidelined that and I will not participate in the election. The outcome of the result is going to be the same. That's a discussion I want us to, because political parties also have to play a role in trying to see that young people get involved in the vote process. But let's talk opposition. George, the opposition at this point seems to be extremely disjointed. You have the Forum for Democratic Change. You have Katonga. Sorry, apologies. You have Katonga and you have Najana Nkumbi. You enter into the Democratic Party, you have a faction that is saying President Norbert Mao is not that candidate and is not fit to be the party flag bearer. There are those who are saying he's the right person to be the party flag bearer. National Unity Platform in its own self, they also have conflicts that are rising. They have missing persons on the other hand. They have issues against the government, but also they have people who have left the party, the likes of Matthias Mpunga, among the key and notable individuals. But also have the coming up of young political parties like PFF, like the Democratic Alliance, which is right now being fronted by Honorable Matthias Mpunga. Like, opposition seems to be in complete disarray. It's that point in time whereby we look at 2026 and someone is asking themselves, is opposition ready? Are the internal structures ready?
Yes, I think I'll pick it up from there. From all those that you have mentioned, I think many of them are actually trying to do the internal democracy processes. Like I mentioned in my earlier submission, National Unity Platform recently appointed its Electoral Management Committee that will be charged with applications from candidates, verifying and also giving them flags. The Democratic Party is also up for its elections of the President General and also other party structures. The PFF recently had a presser, and I think they also announced that they're going to have a roadmap release soon. I don't know how many candidates they will be able to field in the 2026 general elections. And very many other parties, the Democratic Alliance and all those other parties. And I think the quandary we find ourselves in is as a member of the national resistance movement, I think I wouldn't have any challenge with the opposition being divided as it is today. I think everyone is up for themselves. I don't think there's any genuine discussion about coalitions, about joining synergies to make sure that the old man is out of office or that they do away with the national resistance movement. Because the NRM winning, Onen, like I mentioned in my first submission, doesn't come by mistake. You can't have a political party organizing elections in over 72,000 villages in this country, even where there weren't elections, even where there were concessions.
But George, that is a strength that your party has, because one, you have...
financially, and I was going to come to that, and I was going to come, because it would be very unfair of me to demand that of National Unity Platform. Because the NRM does
actually
that.
Allocate the budget for them.
The EC, they get a token but that is it's entirely fair, because it's gotten from the representation that you have in Parliament.
Fair enough.
If you don't have the number of MPs that the NRM has, then you can't get the funding that you want. So and I think because it would be entirely unfair of me, like I've mentioned, to demand that of either PFF to be that comprehensive, to go down to the smallest of villages and have 5 members of the youth.
But George, in a multi-party dispensation,
Yes.
We're looking at democratic processes. And the fact that you have the financial strength as the national resistance movement, that is an edge that makes you beat any political party that is in existence. Second to you is the National Unity Platform, which oftentimes people argue that the only well-known or well-versed in the central region and nowhere else. Looking at these structures, because NRM is blessed to have right now the elections of the LCs going on, that organized structure. More often than not, even in discussion, in this debate, we may find that most of us are actually not quite familiar with structures in NUP, with structures in DP, with structures in PFF, with structures in FDC. But at the end of the day, we just see a candidate. That is a discussion maybe that the opposition needs to have with themselves. That if the ruling party already has that strength and that edge, what can you do differently in terms of structure, adjustment, but also mobilization? Something that I think you can also help hint on, though I know you are the member of the ruling party.
Yeah, definitely. But I think that the whole discussion today revolves around those intra-party structures. Because what you have within the structure in itself then magnifies or portrays certainly the strength. And I think the reason why the village election of the NRM it was a very good PR. Very good all over media, but it was something also because maybe you cut me short. It's a strength because Onen, apart from voting for LC1s, actually it's not voting for LC1s, it's voting for flag bearers for LC1s of the NRM. You have 5 members of the Youth Executive Committee. You have 5 members of the Women's League of a village. You also have 5 members of the Elders Committee of the NRM at the village. So I think this is something that must not be looked at lightly. But still, like we mentioned, the NRM has been in power for over 38 years, going into 40. And these are things that actually come over time. It's not something you can just hint with a magic wand and voila, you have, from my district now, I don't think there's any genuine support of the National Unity Platform. They may be there, but I don't think that people, and I think even in some of the elections we had in 2021, there are some districts where you go and some political parties here would not field the candidate, which is something you cannot say about the NRM. So I think there's a lot And even our time is fast spent. Elections are already started, and people have already expressed interest. So I think for the other political parties, the National Unity Platform, I don't know, the Uganda People's Congress is also going to field candidates this time around.
Definitely.
Or the Democratic Party. Actually, maybe even to mention to what, I don't think the first cooperation agreement was between the NRM and the DP. Also UPC. Yes.
And we know what happened to UPC after that.
I really don't
Where
know.
is the party?
I know the party is not, but it also has some candidates. I think Betty Among is still a member of the UPC.
No.
She shifted?
Betty Among is in NRM.
It's actually
But when
Ginyera
she was first appointed minister of, I think, gender. No, was it lands? She was still a member of the UPC.
Already shifted.
She had already shifted.
She's in NRM now.
No, I know she's in NRM.
She had already transitioned by the time she was.
She had already transitioned. Yeah.
But let's face it, Cynthia. Let's face it. The reality is, our country is just always preparing for the next election.
Definitely.
True.
We finished 2021, and the thought is 2026.
Immediately.
And never in a point in time do we have political parties after elections say, this is possibly what we can do for this country, work together in any sort of way. People are always on blame games. You're doing this, you did that. We also saw the president after the 2021 election said, nope, reached 1 million votes. That was his assertion, but we didn't see it heading to court. That is something also we shall expect in 2026. And the blame game will continue. And then Ugandans again will start preparing for 2031. We're in that roller coaster. The conversation of the next election, and neglecting what can be done in the middle. Something that also many political parties don't do. Maybe because they're oftentimes stopped by the ruling government. Because something that we have oftentimes seen when we have activities organized by other political parties, they're oftentimes thwarted. Yeah? But any activity done by a member of the ruling government thrives. And a discussion that I think is also prudent that we have, because in making you don't just work on structures, as you say. You just can't snap your finger and voila, it's there. That freedom of expression after elections of political parties is minimal, which could also give other political parties an advantage. The NRM right now can make those elections in 72,000 villages. Can National Unity Platform do so? Let's even say after elections, and they want to just have discussions or engagements with other people. Would they be in position to do so? Something that I think, Cynthia, you need to come and hit. The freedom of expression of these political parties, even after elections, is minimal. But even during elections, is minimal. And already their structures are very, they're often, I would say, not known at all. Their resources are also quite meager. Quite a lot of challenges, and yet we are still blaming them. Do you think it would then also be fair on our end?
So I have this one very brilliant friend of mine called Isaac who said something intriguing, and he said Uganda is in a position where we participate in postmortem politics. So postmortem politics is where we are constantly trying to find the reason as to why the problem exists, because it's already dead. You're just trying to find the reason as to why it's dead. And there's never really a vie for how can we solve this. There's never really a vie for, oh, we need to now do this to shift from it. And that is one of the biggest challenges that a lot of political parties face. Because especially with the opposition political parties, the biggest concentration and focus is, why does this problem exist and who can we demonize for the existence of the problem? If you credibly asked, now that you know the problem, how should we solve the problem? There's no responses. So we are just concentrated on how do we remove the president, which is not particularly to say a bad thing, but it can't consume your entirety as a political party to push out the reasonable change that you can create. And it's why most people have reached a point where they say we don't essentially have an opposition existent in Uganda. So I think the second thing then is we can agree that there is little resources and there's little freedom of expression that largely exists within these political parties. But I also think that most of them have taken less interest into low-level politics. which is a niche that NRM has been able to capture. Because when you move, for example, to the north, that ability to have low-level political engagement has the mindsets of a lot of people saying, oh, I'll vote for Museveni, and there's this common statement of, he saved us from the war. And it's because he still would use the historical elements that make you up to hold you to that. And there is that constant appearance, like, I see NRM day in, day out. How many times do you see NUP on a lower level?
But are they even allowed? Is NUP and any other political party allowed to have those engagements?
The question is, have they actually tried for us to determine that they are not allowed?
Definitely.
Because the biggest thing you've seen NUP, for instance, on is either it's a presidential election or it's an MP election. But have we actually seen them to the lower levels to look at what the LC1 elections look like, the women council elections, for instance? Because a lot, and like he said, which I do agree with, the political parties largely struggle with figures. Because minus Bobby Wine and like maybe Joel Senyonyi, who else would you credibly point to and say this is an NUP member, apart from the people within the central region, which begets the label to say that NUP is a central region party, because you're not there. If you go to TESO, for instance, these people know the FDC leaders. You will notice that the LC ones will come from like FDC. You'd have the MPs from FDC, because there's a niche on a local level that you're able to engage. At least even when the former FDC presidential candidate for the 2021 elections, even when he lost in other regions, he significantly had a vie and a push from his region, because you're able to capture the niche of lower level politics. It is one thing to say there is limited freedom of expression. We've vividly seen that when it comes to MP elections. We've not seen that at LC1 level elections. The violence is internal. You'll find maybe NRM member that lost out on the popular vote is fighting a fellow NRM member that won on a popular vote. What picture do we have? It's still NRM that is visibly there. Meaning, you project the idea that they're the only ones that care enough to be there. If it's not an MP election, why should I care? And that's the biggest problem. Because I think even the push for MP elections gear from lower level. So if you don't have that grassroots support, there is no way you're going to have that vivid support. So I can't speak to the idea that there's limited freedom of expression within lower level politics, because I've not seen an active push from some of these political parties to exist in that space.
All right, Arthur, I'm just going to, let's first go for a short break. I'm going to begin with you when we come back. Just thank you very much for staying with us. See you in a break. Thank you. Welcome back from the break. Just before we went into the break, we've been discussing whether political parties are ready for the 2026 general elections. And our context is focusing on the internal party democracy. Arthur, just before we went into the break, we had the submissions of the able Cynthia and George. George was giving us like the strengths that the NRM party has in terms of its structural abilities to be in position to mobilize in over 72,000 villages. And on the other hand, Cynthia gives us a situation in terms of the inability, oftentimes, of the opposition parties to go ahead and even mobilize in the villages after elections. But maybe a question that would linger in many people's minds is, would the opposition actually be accepted? She responds and says, have that list tried? But the reality sticks and stands. We know what happens. Even when an opposition party tries to organize something small, oftentimes they are halted from that process. But let's just have it now. Let's have the debate. Let's first have the ideal discussion. That let's assume that 2026 elections are done, and a political party like FDC organizes a rally, not even a rally, structural discussions in various villages, trying to grow up that structure. How feasible is it? Would you even be able to see something significant coming out of it?
I don't know why we are putting this conversation in a future tense,
Yeah.
because we have seen these things. We have seen that political parties in the opposition have tried to organize consultation meetings, have tried to organize walks, have tried to organize donations, and these things have been stopped in the same way. So one conversation we cannot run away from in the concept of Ugandan politics is that the ground is not leveled. And the reality of politics in any setting is you try to limit as much publicity your opponent gets. Politically, I think one of the shortest periods in Uganda, in a political sense, is the 5 years of a term. Because every time, this is not just now, every time we are going for an election, we are still dealing with the aftermath of the previous election. We have people who were arrested in the previous election, and they have never been released. We have people who took loans, political parties that took loans that have never been paid.
I think that's a very huge assertion to make. Political parties do take loans. I doubt.
We shall get to
maybe
that.
we have individuals
Under
who are vying
political
under
parties.
political parties. Yes.
Okay, fine. Let's take it that way. Then we also have people who ran to court after the election, and now a year after the election, the case has never been resolved. So we are always having a lot of healing to do, which we do not have time to do, and then before we get ready,
Another
the next election is here. So that is the first problem that we are dealing with. That
They increase the term.
now the NRM guy has started. Now the political parties, in a genuine manner of answering the question, is they have not done what they should do to get ready for these elections. A case in example is the manifestos. At this time, we should be aware of the manifestos. I don't know if it's just me, this is my observation. Every time we are voting, it is a very small section of the population that understands the different manifestos. Because first of all, they come in late, and then there is limited voter engagement and civic education to break these things down. And then there's like pressure. One party releases, another one releases, and then Daily Monitor publishes a very big thing, and you don't even understand. And then you have not processed what happened in the previous. Then you have your own personal issues, and we are just caught up in the middle of
There's a lot.
Yeah. Then we also have conversations of things like.
Okay, Arthur, just before, let's just draw context from a lot that happens in this country in regards to the politics. Does that also inform our, does that inform our engagement, does that inform our information or our ability to cast our votes? Because we oftentimes possibly just vote for the sake and don't even don't vote at all.
Yeah, it actually informs that we vote without information.
Sure.
That is the conversation. One, from what Cynthia said, I don't know if it was one of these two said, the youth are tired. So you look at what happened, you look at people that were imprisoned,
But
you look
Arthur,
at all that.
tired yet have just spent in this world not more than that.
No, the
25
conversation is not you are tired because you've been working. You are tired because you have been frustrated by the system. You know that you're going to step out and you'll be arrested. And God help you how you get out of that prison. You know that even if you strike and run on Ugandan streets, you will do little. So people look at all this reality and they're like, I think I am safe sitting at home. Let the election season pass, and I resume my normal hustle. So most of the youth have taken up that. That is why we see decreased voter turn-up in every election. I really hope it's going to change, though I don't see that happening. But I really hope we pick more interest in our elections, because every year that comes, we have fewer people coming for the elections. We have fewer people. And for me, this is the explanation of how people are distancing themselves from the political chaos. Because the few people that come up, the way they end up, we do not want to be like them. And maybe finally, another thing I want to talk about is the conflict resolution in parties.
Yeah.
Truth be told, NRM has the highest level of internal conflicts. But because one, they are very many, like the party is mass, we don't get to see these things. But for me, in the 2021 election, because I tried to closely follow, I saw the election between the president's brother and the daughter to Kutesa. I think it was like the most dangerous election I tried to observe. People were set ablaze, you are in your house, they pour paraffin around and your house catches fire. And then in the morning, people are saying the other opposition, the other camp, set the other home ablaze. People are saying people are banning themselves because they want us to look bad. That was the conversation. So those are the things in NRM. But because the opposition is small, like the numbers are fewer, the grudges can be easily seen and recognized by everyone. So I think that parties should look more into solving their internal problems, because by and large, in all manners of reality, when a political party in the opposition section gets problems, then it is a win for the NRM. And we also need to realize that the NRM has used these chances to dismantle the few structures that they have. Like when those things happen, NRM will come and pick in people and fill them in the NRM. That is how notable figures disappear. That is how this former mayor of Lubaga, when there was chaos in Lubaga, just the president came and picked her out. You will never hear her. This was a very strong period. That is how people like Betty Kamia left. And the NRM is so smart, I should say, or maybe exploitative, that they use these situations to their advantages, and this is further weakening the political parties. So about the conversation of whether our political parties are ready for the election, we can say that physically they are ready because they will show up anyway. But remember, we have over 20 political parties. And in this conversation, taking a sample, I've only talked about like 6. So that should show there are 16 political parties that don't even understand what is going on, at least from what we have seen. But then we should...
What you have seen? From
what they are showing us. Because if you're a political party and from 2021, we are going into the next election, and we haven't heard from you, you don't have a single member of parliament, you don't have a single LC5 councillor. For some of the political parties have less than 5. For some of the political parties, we don't even remember their names. Sure. Then there is a lot of problems. So I think there is another issue I want to talk about is the funding of political parties. Yeah. In other countries, developing countries, actually an example is Kenya, the members of the electorate contributes financially to the elections. In Uganda, we do not understand the funding of our political parties. Actually, by nature, our opposition political parties are expected to be a little broke. That's why, apart from the NRM, which uses taxpayers' money, that's a conversation for another day, that is why a political party that comes with a lot of money is going to be linked with issues. We have had so many allegations coming and relating certain political parties' funding to different sources. So we have a challenge that we do not understand who funds our political party. And this also communicates into what Cynthia said, involvement of the people.
No, but the law provides where the political parties get their monies from. The government funds them.
We have already discussed how much is given.
Government funds them according to representation that you have. 2, the well-wishers, such as yourself.
Well-wishers.
Yeah, well-wishers. The law clearly stipulates where the money comes from. Maybe the conversation that you're trying to have is oftentimes when that money comes in, it's extremely scrutinized or affiliated with powers that we possibly oftentimes can't fathom.
But also, I would want, as a party member, as someone who is passionate, if I belong to a certain political party X, then I would want to know who are the well-wishers of my party. And
which is oftentimes not disclosed?
It's not. As voters, we do not know. Apart from Ginyera's party, for them, they know. Everyone knows. But then for these other political parties, we honestly are not really sure who our partners are, which people we are working with. You hear a certain political leader has traveled abroad, and then in the media will say maybe he's looking for money. And people will just take it that way. And for me, I would want political parties to involve us a little bit. They might not disclose everything, of course, for security, but I would want to know that we affiliate with such a force and such a force and such a force, which I think is fair for me as a voter and a supporter.
Interesting. To Arthur, he wants to know how much his party gets. Which party do you affiliate yourself with? Let's just start with. Shock me. First, shock me and the viewers. We want to know.
The comments.
We want to know.
It will be in the comment section.
That's another problem that you mentioned.
You see,
they criticize them from ground.
If you criticize, Tell us, what is the option? What's the other option?
What is your very good option?
I don't know why you don't want us to get in the conversation.
Anyway, so you're silently, possibly siding with, but cool, it's all right.
I think these are brains that no could actually benefit from. Guys are shy.
No, that's savage.
No, because she actually mentions something of that sort. Because if you complain that a year possibly went to an NRM, at least even Arthur could go where he deems fit, where he could actually implement the things in saying.
And then impact.
It's only fair.
It may not be a political party, it could be a particular individual that you...
Or you can even be independent. You can as well tell us you're independent. Anyway, George, we're approaching towards the end of this conversation. And I know your party is, at this point, pumped up. Every election we see, we're always pumped up. And we have just seen the recently, and still ongoing LC elections.
Yes.
Some that have been seemingly peaceful,
Yes.
though there have been comments of why is the police and the army involved in the protection of the votes.
Of the votes of the people participating.
Others would argue the votes, the people, nonetheless, you wouldn't involve.
Who are Ugandans who are entitled
They
to
don't
that
look like they
security?
protect
Like
people.
I
would-
said before, politics and propaganda work hand in hand.
Yeah, but we have seen the photos of the army
Yeah,
and
true.
the police. Of course, I would understand for the police, but the army. And it brings me the conversation about security and a peaceful election. Is it even going to be viable? Like, if what we saw in the by-election of Nalukola in Kawempe was that just like a teaser to or a precursor to the grand
Yet to unfold.
to a grand violent election in 2026?
I think Onen, because on matters at least to do with how we conduct ourselves in elections, I must be as objective and as sincere as possible. In the 2021 general elections, in 2020 in November, when Bobby Wine was arrested, I was in school then. I was in my Form 6.
Interesting, really.
Yeah, I was in my Form 6 I was in either my Form 6 or Form 5.
5 years down the road.
Yeah, 5 years down the road, and we may have a repeat of actually what happened. So we are at school, and bullets are blazing all over when Bobby Wine was arrested in Luka, I think in Luka district, then taken to Jinja, then brought back to Kampala. Yeah, and the reports show, at least those that you've been able to see, that over 50 people were killed in those 2 days of the 19th and the 20th.
It was 18th and 19th.
Oh, sorry, 18th and 19th. Huh?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think those are some of the grim pictures that we shouldn't see happen again in our country.
So what is a call to the ruling government, because it was them who pulled the shots?
It was them who pulled the shots as a sitting government, surely. But then that would be a discussion also to go into, because I actually have a roommate. My roommate at campus lost the best friend in.
Quite unfortunate.
Yeah, quite unfortunate. So, however much you may want to run away from those happenings, it can be unfortunate that even most. Actually, surprisingly, when you watch the BBC documentary that tried to detail the deaths, most of those people were not actually involved in possibly stoning of the police officer
peaceful.
or blocking. There was even a lady who was actually just carrying food from a restaurant, just going to deliver, and she was aimed at and shot at. So this is indiscriminate. So it may not mind whether you're NUP or whether you're NRM. I highly suspect even some of those people that died were actually NRM supporters. Yeah. So I think it's something that we shouldn't see a repeat of. He mentioned that in some pockets of this country, there are some elections. There are elections, then there are elections, like the one we have in
the
Zimbabwe.
elections within elections.
The elections within elections.
Yeah.
To the extent that, and I think we're going to have a repeat of what happened in Zimbabwe, because they recently, even in the primaries actually of NRM at village level, there was a lot of disagreement because the register was taken. I hear the thing was. So you have an election between Ginyera Orochi, you have Sechikubo, then you have down Sodo is actually also coming back.
Yeah.
So you'd imagine in 2021 actually, the brother to Museveni, Sodo, was the one who won the primaries of the NRM, but was forced to sit out for the daughter to Kutesa to run. Yeah, Shatsi Moshere. So now you have a repeat of the same. And there are very many in Nyabushoji and most of in Isinjiro with Bright Ramirama. So there are very many of those elections that are going to be happening. And people actually die. So I think I think it's only fair, because there's also that trend like you mentioned, the Kawiva by-election gave a picture of actually how things are going to unfold. People often make jokes that JAT has been retreated, they're in their refresher course, they're doing their training and all those things. But I think it's quite unfortunate. And these are one of the reasons why actually people would rather not go out to vote. Because in Kawempe, they will tell you that it's only 30% of the registered, 13% of the registered voters that went out to vote. Because you can't tell me that Nalukola, a person who was nominated by the EC, and went through all that you, a voter, would come out on that polling day with everything that was there, the antiques of big mambas moving around, plain clothed men with guns. You saw the pictures from the 2021 general elections. People in slippers were holding big guns. So it's somewhat unfortunate. I may not have the biggest of voices to call upon the security forces to handle themselves with the demeanor that is required of them. But I think as a citizen, surely it's the least that they could do for us. It's the least that they could do for us.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Cynthia, your way forward and concluding remarks.
I think the biggest thing a student recently gave me a very funny analysis in a motion that was about elections, and he said, see, the citizens were attacking the army, and that's why the army retaliated, and they were only there because there was threats of like external security reasons. And the response was simple. If we do have a working constitution, there is no mandate for the army to be involved in an election, by all means. And I think that just to honor things like the constitution and most importantly to protect the citizens, it is highly unnecessary to have the army. Because if your training is shoot and kill, you can't then handle a conflict where people are quarreling or arguing about, I saw you carrying the ballot box and taking it somewhere, even if you didn't see the person. Meaning that's a dispute that the police could resolve. Your training would say if they start fighting, I shoot them. So I think it's more just about excluding the army from the entire electoral process, because I think it also scares away, like he said, people from having the interest to vote. If you have the police being violent, the army being violent, it loses the essence of an election and it loses the legitimacy of a democracy. I think even for the president in the vie to look as democratic as possible and show, like, you know, the perception that he's actually won an election, he has all the more interest to make sure that people are actually willing to go out and vote. He has all the more interest to make sure that people are actually, you know, within a safe environment to vote. So I think the biggest thing is just taking down the army from participation in elections especially. And that would be a very, very huge step forward into propelling participation of voters. I think the other thing would just be in terms of, because this is something he said, and I think when people say civic engagement, civic education, the biggest assumption is to tell you, oh, this is how you're supposed to tick when you're voting, this is how, you know, you maybe place your finger on the ink after voting. But I think it goes beyond that. Do we have situations where political parties are coming down to explain their manifestos, not just campaigning, but explaining their manifestos and showing why the things that they have in their manifestos are the most important things that people need to pay attention to, that people need to care for? I think there is an instance of this with Mugisha Muntu when he tried to, you know, get down and explain the things that he had in his manifesto. We knew about it too well to a point that we were able to criticize, because there are people who said, Mugisha Muntu's manifesto is for Uganda in like 100 years. It's for a first world country, probably a middle income country most likely. But the only reason we had such opinions is because we understood what he was trying to achieve in that manifesto, how he wanted to achieve it. The question is, do we actually know what the NUP manifesto looks like or what they want to achieve? Like he said, you have so many problems. You're going through the most. You have a job that is stressing you. Your boss wants you at work, even in the rain. And then Daily Monitor releases a 500-page newspaper. Are you actually willing to sit down and read through these things and understand them? Or do you even have the capacity to interpret them? Is there someone on the radio that is explaining these manifestos to people that can't afford or can't access Daily Monitor? I think when it comes to civic engagement and education, these are some of the things that need to be looked into for different stakeholders within the country.
Interesting. Arthur, your concluding remarks and a call out to opposition parties and how best they can prepare come 2026.
And the independent candidates.
Thank you so much, and the NRM as well. First of all, Cynthia has talked about it, civic education, in spaces that are safe, because we know you can't come out and call people and teach them. We shall see tear gas. But in spaces that are safe, like radio shows, where the few people who have access to those places, we should now, as the opposition, they should hold with criticizing the government and focus on themselves. Tell people what they can do, explain the alternative policies they are bringing on board. Try and tell people the importance of voting, break down their manifesto to people, actually avail the manifesto in the first place, and then break it for the people to understand, and then do resource mobilization, because we have had scenarios where political parties get paralyzed financially in the middle of the election. And then another thing is maybe settle the differences within, which is actually very, very importantly, because if someone is an FDC supporter and they're hearing FDC Katonga and FDC Najanakumbi, for someone in Kabare, now which FDC do they belong to? So these are things that need to be resolved, and then the people can know where to belong. And then also to the opposition political parties, I think we need, for me, I'm one of the people who believe that opposition political parties should find a way of working together. If we can ever get to a dream Uganda where the opposition is presenting one candidate, we shall have made it in life. I do not see that coming, but we should do every positive step in bringing that. And then to the electorate, first of all, the script of Ugandan politics is not going to change. There will be guns. We shall make the calls. The civil society organizations are going to speak. The election observers are going to speak. People will be arrested. People will be killed. I call upon the youth, especially the youth especially. Please protect yourself. Do not go where it is not worth it. I think it is in the 2021 election when Minister Salama Musumba was the General Secretary. She made a statement that caused a lot of problems in the media. She said, the state will kill your children. It was...
Security Minister then.
No, it was Salama Musumba, I'm very sure. She was giving a warning.
The FDC?
No, just in Kasule Lumumba. Yeah, and she said the state will kill your children. It was a big paragraph, and that was the last one. And people picked it up, but in the concept of reality, that line is true. If you throw yourself on the street carelessly, if you show up anyhow, please take care of yourself. That is the whole point as a voter. It is very important for you to come and vote. It is important for you to oppose or to support whichever political party, but it is not worth it that you are set ablaze because you are supporting someone. So be very careful, show up and vote, spread the message of the political party you believe in peacefully, and hopefully we shall get to the dream Uganda. Thank you so much.
Thank you. George, concluding remarks.
I thought I'd concluded. Though, I think I'll agree with everyone and everything that they have said. I think that's in journalism, it's where they say that no story is worth your life.
Your life.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think I will heavily agree with what others said, is that the times that we live in, believe me, they are, what should I say? There's everything there to see. So there's no acting like Superman or superhero. You'll end up losing your life.
Someone is an Avenger in this room.
Someone Arthur is an independent Avenger. So I think there's need to live very cautiously. And I think the biggest stakeholder in our safety, or in the biggest stakeholder in having a peaceful election, is actually the security forces. But the security forces also are working on orders. It's not something that they just wake up and start terrorizing people. So I think those people that send in the orders, I think they should be more as humanly
as possible. Thank you very much, Arthur, Cynthia, George, for this wonderful conversation. It has been quite an interesting conversation. To your dear esteemed viewers for always watching, thank you very much for following through. Center for Constitutional Governance for making this possible, and the production crew for always making sure the show is up, running, and on time. My name is Drake Onen. See you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.